Hey, thank you very much, everybody. And welcome to tonight's concert. Thanks especially for tuning in tonight on Super Bowl night. I think I played on the same evening last year, and there were plenty of people who wanted to watch the piano concert instead, so I figured why not just play a concert tonight. And let me double check both streams real quick. Thanks, Richard. I like to try and say hello to everybody that I can who's tuning in. Gustavo in Brazil, Kelly in Florida. That first tune was a rag by Brun Campbell, one of Scott Joplin's early piano students. He recorded it years later in the 1940s. It's called Chestnut Street in the 90s. And it's meant to imitate the sounds of the pianos that were played up and down Chestnut Street in St. Louis back in the 1890s. So that's my take on that tune. My theme for tonight's concert is Rare and Rip-Roarin Rags. I use that, or a similar title, for one of my CDs. And to continue, I want to do one of my favorites of all the unpublished ragtime piano pieces. And so many of you know that Johnny Maddox was my big musical influence, and so I'm going to play for you what was probably his very favorite rag. And this piece of music is discussed in the book, They All Played Ragtime, but it was never published and still really has not been ever put in print in any folio or books. And it's called Price's Rag, written by an itinerant pianist named Piano Price Davis. We really do not know much about the guy, and it survived in a recording of Glover Compton on a tape from the 1950s. Glover was a black pianist from Chicago who was a close friend of Johnny's. That's one of the reasons he loved this. And he used to say this is very much what ragtime must have sounded like about 1900. So here's Price's Rag. much. Any applause? My parents are sitting here tonight. I think it sounds better with applause. It just makes me feel a little bit more normal. Well, I hope you all enjoyed Price's Rag. I'll try not to drone on about the history of the songs to the point where it would be too much for tonight's concert, but it certainly is an interesting aspect of what I'm planning to play tonight. I'm trying to bring these pieces back to life so that they sound good and are enjoyable even for a modern day audience. That's part of what I want to do. But I do want to play some familiar songs as well, as usual, and I'm going to play a number of pieces of music by one of Scott Joplin's other piano students, Arthur Marshall. And they met when Arthur was quite young in the 1890s. Joplin stayed with the Marshall family in Sedalia, Missouri. And so I thought I'd play probably the greatest of the Marshall rags, which he wrote in part with Scott Joplin. From 1900, the famous Swipesy Cakewalk. Great. Okay, here's Swipesy Cakewalk from 1900. That's the Swipesy Cakewalk by Arthur Marshall and Scott Joplin. Maybe there's some new people watching tonight. If you're a first timer, I hope you enjoy all of this authentic ragtime piano, and if you do, I accept virtual tips for these concerts. No obligation, but there is PayPal and Venmo information in the postings, and I even have a P.O. box on my website for those that prefer to send checks. we're about to do some more ragtime piano pieces by Arthur Marshall, who was born in Sedalia, Missouri, and then later in his life he lived in Kansas City. And in the late 1950s, two of the prominent ragtime piano historians of the time got him to travel back to Sedalia and interviewed Marshall, even got him to play the piano a little bit. And I'm talking about ragtime Bob Darch and the late Traber Tishner, who I was fortunate to get to know. And Traber, who would have been 19 years old in 1959, had the smarts to bring a reel-to-reel tape recorder with him and recorded just a little bit of Arthur Marshall playing the piano. We're so lucky that he did that. They were really Bob Darch's concerts, and he was the first one to play ragtime concerts in Sedalia after ragtime music had already faded for many years in the 1950s. And one of the pieces that Marshall played at those performances was just part of a piece called Little Jack's Rag. And I thought it would be fun to play the whole thing for you. Marshall only played the trio, but I'm going to do the whole piece for you. And it remained unpublished until the 1970s when Terry Waldo printed it in his book called This Is Ragtime. He was the first one to publish the music. So here's a Little Jack's Rag by Arthur Marshall, and I think that this was a nickname for his daughter, Little Jack's Rag, something like that. I'd have to check the book to be sure, but here's the piece. I've always loved it, especially the trio. very much, both in person and virtually. That's Little Jack's Rag by Arthur Marshall. You can tell that his style is a little bit more folksy than Joplin. It was still very unique, and I certainly love it. And I mentioned that during those performances, Marshall only played the third part of that piece, and part of the reason for that was he was almost 80 years old and he'd had a stroke which affected his left arm. And what I've done with a number of these pieces is I've tried to imagine what the piece would have sounded like if the composer was playing it as a young person. Unfortunately, the only recordings of many of the pioneer ragtime composers were made, late in life when they couldn't necessarily play the piano as well as they could when they were young. And so there was one piece of music that survived on this tape that Traber made that was never published, and it still hasn't been. And when I first talked to Traber about this tape and made a digital transfer of the tape, I think I was the first person to do that, he told me that he thought the title of the piece was The Pea Picker by Marshall. And it's very hard to hear on the tape exactly what the composer is saying. There's background noise. This concert, or the concerts where he performed, were given for hundreds of people at the two high schools in Sedalia, Missouri. And since then, a couple of people have suggested that he did not call the piece The Pea Picker, but that he called it a key tickler, as in tickling the piano keys. It's probably key tickler, to be honest with you, but the name The Pea Picker is what Traber called it, and it fits in with the titles of Marshall's other rags, about food, Ham and the Peach. And so I was the first one to ever record this piece on my first album for Rivermont Records, which was called On a Circular Staircase, and I tried to play it exactly the way the composer did it. What I have done since then is arranged it myself so that it sounds better. And there's not much to it. The A section is great. The introduction sounds exactly like Little Jack's Rag, so I have included the introduction from that piece. And Traber pointed out to me that the third section sounds almost like the trio of Scott Joplin's Rip-Roarin Rag. So I have thrown in the trio of Rip-Roarin Rag to create a more complete piece. I have not performed this very often. See what you all think of it. So this is my arrangement of The Pea Picker by Arthur Marshall. you so much. That's The Pea Picker by Arthur Marshall, subtitled A Key Tickler. I've spent years trying to make that into a whole, complete piece, and I am finally about to release my arrangement of the piece as published sheet music. Vincent Johnson has been typesetting some sheet music for me, and he does it so that the music looks just like the vintage music fonts of the early 1900s. So within the next week or so, I will have my arrangement of that piece available for sale on my website. I've put up a number of pieces of sheet music at this point. I never used to think much about it, but I know a lot of people like to buy those things. So it'll be there if you're interested. That's some of the music by Arthur Marshall. Now, let me tell you about one other thing that occurred during these concerts in Sedalia. Both Traber and Bob Darch met a man that lived in St. Louis named Claude Schoaf Williams. Schoaf was his nickname, as in chauffeur. And I think he owned a music store or something like that. He was a black pianist who was born in Sedalia, but they found him in St. Louis and invited him to play at the same concerts in Sedalia, Missouri. There was a concert at the white high school and also one at the black high school. And Schoaf Williams got up and sang a song, a love song that he used to sing to the girls that he would try and impress in the houses where he played in the early 1900s. And remember, this is in the 1950s, a black man performing at a white high school. And I remember Traber telling me that Bob Darch stood on the side of the stage and was just sweating bullets because that could have got him in big trouble. But then the next thing that happened was very interesting. Schoaf Williams played one of his own rags called Williams's Rag, and I'll play it for you now. It's very unique. You might call it folk ragtime. And you know, in those days, everybody shared musical ideas, musical themes, traveled around the country, and sometimes we do not know exactly where they originated. And this piece includes the B section of Les Copeland's French Pastry Rag right in the middle of it. It's a great piece, and I was also the first one to ever record this piece on that same album after I did the Pea Picker. So here's my recreation of Williams's Rag by Schoaf Williams. And that's it. Williams's Rag. Thank you, folks. It was a pretty short performance on the tape, and so again, I've tried to improve some of these unpublished rags. What I did is I repeated each section twice on that. Now, I did get some requests for tonight's concert, of course. And happy to take more requests as tonight goes on. I won't be able to play just all unpublished, obscure rags all night. One of the requests I thought I might do is for one of my friends and followers in Seattle, Amy Lundgren. She loves the Calliope Rag. And this is another piece of music that survived and was published years after the ragtime era was over. And it was also preserved and discovered by Bob Darch and first published in a book called They All Played Ragtime, which is one of the things that made me fall in love with all this music. So let me do the Calliope Rag for you. It's not exactly certain how much of the piece was written by James Scott and how much was by Bob Darch. He got the manuscript from Scott's family. I'm sure at least the first section, the melody's by Scott. But it's a wonderful piece, however you look at it. Calliope Rag, which is named, of course, for the steam calliopes that they used to play on riverboats. Here you go, Amy. Hey, thank you so much. There's the Calliope Rag. No, Gustavo, I'm afraid I don't know Poor Papa by heart, and I don't know Something Doing by heart either. Go ahead and ask for more requests if you'd like to hear them, folks, please. I've got a number of things planned that I want to play for you. I mentioned Amy, who watches every week from Seattle, but she just sent me a piece of music this week, which I've never performed, and I thought, well, while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and play this for her. This is a rag, and it was a very popular one, too. This is one that was published in 1911. It's really a one-step. It doesn't have much syncopation in it, but it was written by an interesting African-American composer, Cecil Macklin. That's how his name is written on this sheet music for this piece. And Later on, he shortened it to Cecil Mack, and he was a lyricist, not only a composer of instrumental music, but a lyricist. He wrote the words to some Broadway show tunes that were very popular. In 1923, the show Runnin' Wild, the Charleston, and Old Fashioned Love with James P. Johnson. But for now, here's Très Moutarde, Too Much Mustard. This will be the first time I've ever played this. Hey, thank you so much. Well, I called tonight's concert Rare and Rip-Roarin Rags, so it doesn't have to be rare, just Rip-Roarin. And believe it or not, Stephen, I have never played Solace by Scott Joplin. I've never learned it by heart. I will do that eventually. I certainly love the piece. Gustavo, yeah, maybe I'll play Ham Ann since I'm doing some Arthur Marshall rags. That's certainly not a bad idea. I want to play you one of the unpublished rags, one of the other ones that I really love. And I recorded this on that same album, which is called On a Circular Staircase. I don't have any copies of it left, but you can get digital downloads of it. And this one survived on a player piano roll. Many rags survived on piano rolls that were never published as sheet music. And this was written by one of the great Indianapolis ragtime composers. His name was Paul Pratt. And he had music published by the Ofterhide family and also John Stark, the publisher of all the great classic rags. But again, this one only survived on piano roll, and I'm one of the few people that's ever recorded it. It's called Waylana Rag, W-A-I-L-A-N-A. I do not know what it means. Maybe it's a name. If any of you musical historians know, let me know. But it's just a terrific piece. Waylana Rag by Paul Pratt. Yeah, I had to get out plenty of sheet music tonight. But, yeah, Hot House Rag is great. I should learn Missouri Romp. Like I say, I love Marshall. I'm afraid I don't know those by heart. Even though I have the sheet music out here, I have spent some hours practicing these things ahead of time. Now, what else is on my list? Any more requests coming in here? Oh, Kelly asked for the Ragtime Dance by Joplin. I do know that by heart. Maybe I'll play that for you. Wouldn't hurt to have one of his great classic rags thrown in here. Let's see. Yeah, I think this would be a good time to do it. I'll play it for you, Kelly. This is one of my favorite Joplin pieces, and it dates from early in his career. Personally, I love the early Joplin rags because they're a little more upbeat, a little more joyful. The harmonies and melodies. Later on in Joplin's life, he faced a lot of hardships. His music was a lot more moody. Johnny was the one who pointed that out to me. And so originally the Ragtime Dance was, I think, a ballet, and there was both an instrumental and a song version of the music that was published. This is Scott Joplin's Ragtime Dance, the instrumental version from 1906. Thank you very much. The Ragtime Dance by Scott Joplin. Since I can't stop my feet very well without knocking over my iPhone, I thought I'd try clapping instead. Worked pretty good. I'm so glad you all like that piece. It's one of my very favorites too. Oh, I'm reading comments here on YouTube from Pizza Piano. My 16-year-old son turned me on to your concerts a few weeks ago. Wow. Well, thank him for me. I'm glad if young people get interested in this music. Makes me very happy. I'm not the only one. Oh, Gwynny's watching from Shenandoah. Hello there. Now, let's go back to some of the rare rags that I want to play for you tonight. And this one I think a number of you have already heard. And it's not really a rag, it's a ragtime song. And I learned this from Johnny Maddox too. This is the beautiful Corsica by Joe Jordan. And the song is interesting. The verse is very upbeat and it almost sounds like the famous Teasin' Rag, but the chorus is beautiful and quite different. I just play the chorus of it, and I do it as a medley with another song by a different black composer called At the Ball That's All. They work really well together. And Jordan was most famous for that Teasin' Rag and the song Lovey Joe, which made Fanny Bryce famous. This piece has still never been published. I learned it from Johnny, who learned it right from Joe, but I also have the manuscript that Johnny copied and gave me. Anyway, here is Corsica, that French rag by Joe Jordan. so much. Corsica, that French rag. There's words to it. I really would love someone with a great voice to sing that sometime. Now let's see. I was reading some comments. Oh, Akimi asked me about another song by Joe Jordan, Happiness. I've never played that. He wrote that with Fred Fisher, who wrote Peg of My Heart. It's probably a beautiful song. If you've never heard much of Jordan's music, one of the best places to hear all of it today on a modern recording is the album that the Paragon Ragtime Orchestra recorded. They did a whole CD of Jordan's music about 15 years ago, which is called From Barrel House to Broadway, the Musical Odyssey of Joe Jordan. And I'll play one more of his pieces for you, and this, again, has never been published, completely unpublished, but I have the manuscript thanks to Johnny, and this is kind of cool. It's not as difficult as it sounds. I shouldn't be giving those secrets away, but this is a piece that Jordan wrote called The Half and Half. And the half and half was a dance of the ragtime years that was popular in the 1910s. And they called it half and half because it's in 5/4 time. It's half in 3, it's half waltz, and half in duple meter. And I don't know exactly when he wrote this. The date on the manuscript is a little bit later. I'd be surprised if he didn't actually write this in the 1910s. And this is the only piece I've ever played in 5/4 time. Let me do it for you now. Half and Half by Joe Jordan. Thank you very much. Half and Half by Joe Jordan. Oh, Akimi, just email me. I'll send you that sheet music anytime. I have the original copy of it. And, well, we're a little over halfway through the concert here, so if you'll forgive me, I'll remind you that I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. I really appreciate it. No obligation, but there's both PayPal and Venmo information. Tips can be sent that way, or I also have a P.O. box if you prefer to send checks, and that's on my website. And I even have some relatively new sheet music on my website for sale, along with CDs and so forth. So let me know if you're interested in those things. It's AdamGSwanson.com. It has my middle initial in it. And I'll be playing you some more, at least one more of those pieces of sheet music. Let's see. I'll need a few more requests to fill out the concert tonight. So if you have some that might fit the theme too, I prefer that. Keep thinking about it. Send them on in. Just type it in the chat. That's a very good question. Pizza Piano asked, why isn't Joe Jordan better known? I don't know. You know, during his own time, he was a very successful businessman and probably made more money than Scott Joplin ever did. Yeah. Let me see. I might be able to play Secondhand Rose by heart. I prefer to practice things ahead of time if I can do that. If I'm not 100% sure I know it by heart. Outside of Jordan, one of the African-American ragtime pianists that I love, whose music is kind of forgotten, I'll tell you about it and play some of his pieces now. That's Charlie Thompson from St. Louis. And I did an interview with Traber Tishner about Charlie because they knew each other. Actually interviewed Traber on tape twice about Charlie. And he only had one published piece of music, which was the Lily Rag. I might play that for you if you like. But I'll play the two rags he wrote that survived through recordings, which still have never been published. The man that I think is the most gifted at transcribing unpublished piano recordings is Tom Breyer. And when I first met Tom, he did all of the Charlie Thompson pieces for me. Exact note-for-note transcriptions. And I've tried to emulate the Charlie Thompson style for years. The first one I'll play for you is called Delmar Rag, which he supposedly played in the big contest where he competed against Tom Turpin in 1916. He played the Lily Rag and Delmar Rag. Have that information through an interview. And a lot of people think that it was named for Delmar Boulevard in St. Louis, but Traber told me that it was actually named for Delmar Gardens, which was an early amusement park in St. Louis. And I don't think Delmar Boulevard was around at that time, or it had a different name, something like that. So that's what it was named for, Delmar Gardens. And the A section of the rag is based on Mendelssohn's Spring Song, a very famous melody. You can hardly recognize it in the rag if you don't know the piece I'm talking about. That's what it sounds like. So that's the Spring Song, and it's just a small part of Charlie Thompson's Delmar Rag, coming up next. Thank you very much, Delmar Rag. And let me do one more of his pieces for you. There's about 3 of his rags that survive and 2 that are really blues. So I'll definitely play the other rag for you. And this one was written right at the end of his life. It was written in 1964, which was the year he passed away. Thank goodness that Traber Tishner recorded it on a tape. And that was the same year that the St. Louis Archway was first built. It was 1964. It was I think the bicentennial of the city of St. Louis. So this is called Centennial Rag by Charlie Thompson. And there's one section in this piece which is also found in Jelly Roll Morton's King Porter Stomp. And like I was saying earlier, especially with these unpublished rags, these musical themes were shared among different piano players in different parts of the country. We don't know exactly where they came from necessarily. Maybe Morton was the first to compose it. I'm not sure. Charlie Thompson said that it was used in piano cutting contests, that theme. But anyway, here's the Centennial Rag by Charlie Thompson. Hey, thank you so much. Somebody says that song is a real zinger. Yeah, I've always thought so. Peter on Facebook asked for some blues. Well, maybe I will play some blues for you. I mentioned that Charlie Thompson wrote some great blues numbers too. I could play one or both of them. Let's see. I've got plenty of time to play both of them. Let's do it. He recorded some of the same pieces under various titles later in his life, and when it first came out on the '78 record, the blues piece was called The Lingering Blues. Let me see if I can play The Lingering Blues by Charlie Thompson for you now. In the early days, blues and ragtime were very similar. They were played somewhat more up-tempo for dancing because everybody danced in those days. I guess this is more like a blues that you would have heard in the 20s. But again, by Charlie Thompson, and survives through recordings later in his life. Lingering Blues. And that's the Lingering Blues. Thank you. Good, you like that? I don't know many of the Moocher. No, afraid I don't know that by heart. Blues really turned into boogie-woogie piano. Well, it's the same chord progression, the 12-bar blues. So I'll play you the boogie-woogie piece that was written by the same guy. This is very interesting. It's called the Buffet Flat Blues. Most of his music, again, never published, but I think it's terrific. The Buffet Flat was a house of ill repute, but it was also a speakeasy. It was multiple different things, and I didn't know for years what that was, and finally found out what that terminology was in black slang of the 1920s. But it's also very difficult, very unusual to play boogie-woogie in the key of A flat. So let's do the Buffet Flat Blues. Yes, Buffet Flat Blues. Thank you very much, folks. Robert on Facebook is asking about maybe playing a Zez Confrey piece. Yes. I'm planning on doing some novelty piano for you tonight. The theme of my concert is Rare and Rip-Roarin Rags, so I have at least one or two unpublished novelty piano solos that I may play for you tonight. In fact, this first one, let me tell you about it. I discovered this on a reel-to-reel tape that no one knew about. I was visiting one of the ragtime piano collectors named Smiley Wallace, who lives in Kansas City. Smiley's just turned 90, I think, just in the last few days. And he had this tape of an interview that Bob Darch did with Joseph Lamb in his closet. And Joseph Lamb, of course, was the great classic ragtime writer, but he also wrote some wonderful novelty piano solos in the 1920s, very much like Zez Confrey in that style, and they were never published. But a few of them have survived. 4 of them were discovered in the files of the Mills Music Company just in the last few years. They're wonderful pieces. I should learn to play a few of those. And the one that I found on this tape is called Waffles. It's very cute. I created my own arrangement of it. And here's the sheet music, complete with the sheet music cover. I sell them on my website. Let me play Waffles for you now. I was the first one to ever record this, too. I don't really need the sheet music. Peter's asking for Fats Waller. Oh, I certainly play Fats Waller. If you've never tuned into my live streams before, I have done that many times. Tonight, just especially because it's the Super Bowl, I thought I'd do some of these rare unpublished rags that people don't play very often. So I think I'm going to stick to that theme for the concert. And let's see. Oh, somebody's reminding me. Yeah, multiple people are reminding me on YouTube here. Please click the thumbs up button, the like button. It helps with the algorithms on both Facebook and YouTube. If you're enjoying the concert, I really would appreciate that. I'm going to do a little bit more advanced piece for you now. you know, what survived of that Joseph Land piece was only fragments in a sense. And this is a really hot novelty piano solo. The sheet music has never been published. I'm probably one of the only people in the world that plays this, but I play it because I think it's really good. And this was written by a pianist named Sid Reinhardt, who played in vaudeville, and he did have some music that was published, some other novelties. I think there was one called Mahjong. This one is called the Boston Trot. It only survives through his recording on 78. It's acoustic, even before they had microphones. But it's such a great piece that I wanted to learn it. And thankfully, Vincent Johnson had transcribed the music very well. And so I can play it for you now. This is the Boston Trot by Sid Reinhardt. Thank you very much. That's the Boston Trot. I think I've only ever performed that one other time when I was playing a concert in New Hampshire, and some friends of mine from Boston came to the concert. It's just a really great piece. Kelly says, Adam deserves thousands of thumbs up. Well, a few extra ones doesn't hurt. I appreciate that. Bernie on Facebook asked me if I know any originals by Trevor J. Tishner. I certainly do. And I've got a little time to fill here at the end of the concert, so maybe I'll do that. Unfortunately, I don't know American Beauty Rag by heart. Yeah, well, I can do both of them for you. I know two of Trevor's rags. They're really great. I'll go ahead and do this. The first one is slightly earlier. This dates from the 1960s, relatively contemporary rags. We'll do the Show Me Rag, named for the Show Me State of Missouri by Trevor J. Tishner, one of my musical idols for sure. If you've never heard of him, look him up. And here's the Show Me Rag, and then I'll tell you about the next one. Thank you so much. Show Me Rag by Trey Tishner. Frank, I do know the great Tom Shea pieces, but I think I'm running out of time for tonight. I've got something specific I want to end with. But next up, let me do the other piece by Traber that I love, and I think he wrote this in the 1990s. It's called Deep in the Ozarks, subtitled A Missouri Ozark Blues. I don't know that it really has a 12-bar blues pattern anywhere in it, but it's a great rag. We're back to the folk-style ragtime that I opened the concert with, really. Deep in the Ozarks by Traber Tishner. thank you so much, folks. That's deep in the Ozarks. I saw that Dwayne just asked me for one of the Lucky Roberts rags, and I am planning on finishing the concert tonight with one of the Lucky Roberts rags. So let me tell you about that. But first, thank you so much to all of you who have tuned in tonight, especially in the middle of the Super Bowl. I really appreciate it. And thanks for those tips, everybody. Marilyn, Bill, I'm glad you were watching tonight. I figured, I don't know if you were sports fans or not, but appreciate it very much. Hope you have enjoyed some of these rare ragtime pieces. Thank you for listening to these folks. And I called this concert Rare and Rip-Roarin Rags. I did a CD entitled Rare and Rip-Roarin Rags of 1912. It was all music from the sheet music collection of the late Janice Cleary. I still do have copies of that CD available, incidentally. If you're interested in that, you can get it on my website. But the funny thing is, I don't know any of the pieces off of that album by heart because I sight read all of the sheet music for the CD when I did that about 10 years ago. So that was part of the inspiration for tonight's concert, but I'm going to play for you one of the few surviving Lucky Roberts rags that was never published, and this was transcribed for me by Tom Breyer. Again, he's one of the few guys that can really do that very well. One of the others is pianist from Canada named Max Keenlyside, and Vincent Johnson's pretty good at it too. But I've been playing the piece now for over 10 years. I did have the pleasure of playing it at Carnegie Hall. This is a rag called Nothing by Lucky Roberts. thank you, folks. Yeah, I'm glad the stream seemed to work pretty well tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially for those virtual tips. And I will be doing another concert next Sunday night, same time, same place on Facebook and YouTube. I haven't decided what the theme for the concert will be. I'm sure I can come up with one that I haven't done yet. I appreciate your attention to these rare ragtime pieces. Thank you very much. And I guess that's good night for now. We'll see you next week, folks.